and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast. From Philadelphia to Los Angeles and everywhere in between. Filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio. It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
We are back with another episode. Welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation. Today, we're going to be covering a little bit of the recap of Ohio State, Penn State, because I wasn't on for the live reaction. So I wanted to get some things off my chest on that. And then we're going to cover Indiana preview. So obviously, coming down from this weekend, we lost to Ohio State in not great fashion, but I mean, I know you guys covered it in depth, but my takeaway was that game was ours for the taking. Either team could have won that game. We just didn't do enough things right to really get to that winning maybe mentality, but even on offense, like we looked bad, if you're asking me. I think you guys kind of hit that. Like, we didn't look like a team that was ever going to win that game, even though it was a closer possession game towards the end there and really the whole way through. So just want to do a quick recap of Ohio State. I've been seeing things fire Franklin nonstop. Don't get me wrong, I used to be one of those people, but I honestly don't think Franklin is overrated like everyone's been saying. I just think he's overpaid. We've been winning close to 11 games most year. Now, Zach, I know you have the stats on the schedule of previous years or the win-loss for previous years. You take out the COVID year and kind of the after effects of the COVID year, the year after. I mean, Franklin might have, if things go according to plan the rest of the season, might have another 11-win season, 5 out of the last 8 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'd have 16, 17, 19, 22, 23.
I mean, maybe Franklin's window, like his ceiling, just 11 wins. Maybe that's it. But for what we're paying him, I understand why people are frustrated. But he hasn't been favored in all but one of these games, I believe, right?
Yeah, the top 10 stat, I think it's like 1 or 3 of those games. He's like 3-19. I mean, the big one is like the 1-9 versus Ohio State, but like I think top 10 games he's like 3-16 or something. But yeah, he's only been favored in a handful of them, and that stat can be so misleading too, because
the favored stat or the top 10?
No, the top 10 thing, or like a top 15 or 25, however you want to couch it, because the Big Ten's so bad that we don't play. Nobody else in the league gets to be top 10. Other than the 2 really, really elite programs. So we don't. Here's a great example. Virginia last week beat number 10 North Carolina. Yeah, Virginia's awful, and so I guess now North Carolina's awful, but also I would love to see Franklin play a top 10 North Carolina. I think we might be able to beat that team from time to time.
Yeah.
So it's not all top 10 teams, not all road games, not all big games are alike, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we're in the Big Ten, and Ohio State and Michigan are in the Big Ten. Right. So you can have your druthers, but those are the top 10 games you're going to play in.
I mean, for instance, what was Utah ranked last year when we beat them? 11.
I think they were top 10. I think they were like 8.
That was their top 10 win.
I think that was one of their 3 top 10 wins. I think they were 8 and we were 11.
And then probably the other one was maybe Memphis when we beat them.
No, they were like 19 or something. He beat one of the years we beat Michigan at home, either 17 or 19. I think it
was
10.
19 because I was there for that game. It was like I think they were like 5th or 6th, and we were like 8th or something like that.
Yeah, one was the Utah game. One was obviously Ohio State in 2016, and then I think either 17 or 19 Michigan. I think
it was 19.
One of those 2 years they were top 10 at home.
But yeah, like I'm saying, like I know people want to just like kind of crap on Franklin, but I think we're kind of all in the same mindset. Like, who else are you going to get in all of reality? Like, this is just kind of Penn State football purgatory that we're stuck in. You know, like Devin's great thumbnail in the last video. Like, we're just stuck in that constant rotation, and maybe things get better with the expansion of the Big Ten. Possibly. I don't know what your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, at least we won't be playing the two same teams every year.
So to me, I think the bigger thing is the expansion of the college football playoffs. Because how are you going to fire James Franklin when we get to the college football playoffs every single year with a 12-team playoff? And realistically, we probably should. Obviously, I think Zach has said this like 20 times this season. That's why this season was so crucial to us Penn State fans, was we wanted to be able to say we were one of those 14 teams that made it to the college football playoff with only 4 teams available. I think, I mean, they keep showing that stat of like Penn State is the team that will benefit the most from going to 12 teams because we're always 9 or 10 wins at that point of the year. And to your point, with the expanded Big Ten, maybe we cannibalize each other and the SEC cannibalizes each other, and all these teams, maybe 2 losses, maybe even 3 losses is good enough to make it to the college football playoff most years.
And then at that point, it's anybody knows.
Yeah. So I think, to me, obviously I'm not really a James Franklin guy. I think there's nothing wrong with him. I think he's a perfectly serviceable coach. But I don't ever see us winning a national championship with James Franklin. The problem is I don't know who you would hire that makes me feel like, yeah, we could win a national championship. You're not going to go get Urban Meyer or, I don't know, anybody else like that I feel like, yeah.
I mean, what coaches really have won national championships?
Zach's boy, Kyle Whittingham, like if he came to Penn State, I feel like I would be like, yeah, we might win a national championship because I really like the way he runs his offense. His defense is good. He recruits really well at a place in Utah. So I think there's guys, but would Penn State steal Kyle Whittingham from Utah? I don't think so. Why would he leave Utah unless he's going to, like, I don't know, USC or something, and they beat USC every year. So
who knows if he even wants that? I mean, like he you know, or not even just him in particular, but like the point you're making is really well taken, that there's like a class of guys that you're like that those are national title winning coaches. We can't get them, or they're Urban Meyer and there's so much baggage that the administration will never touch them. Right. Or there's these other guys out there who we think are just really great coaches, and they're at places where they're never going to be in the hunt. Like I think Lance Leipold at Kansas might be the best coach in college football.
I think that's a good point.
Does that magically does his ability to take a bunch of mutt and coach them up and develop them and be a serviceable Big 12 team, does that translate to, okay, now you're going to have a whole bunch of 4 stars, you're going to have all the pressures that come with being a top 10 blue blood, now let's see if you can do it? I don't think there's a guarantee that translates. Some guys are just suited for certain roles, and covering this whole discussion is Franklin's contract, and he's not going anywhere for a long time because of that. So all the people out there that are saying fire Franklin, it's even if I agreed with you, even if you're right, and I thought you were like objectively right, and Franklin is holding the program back, it's not happening. So I've just got to the point where like it's not even really worth worrying about it. And I think the 12-team playoff has kind of eased my angst over the whole situation. And frankly, the bounce back that he had last year.
That last year's team should have won 11 games. I mean, that's
bought him some goodwill. That bought him some goodwill, at least with me anyway, because I think, to Jordan's earlier point, I think now you can, depending how this season finishes up, even though I expect a loss to Michigan, it's looking like that probably will translate into a decent New Year's Six Bowl. Maybe you win that. Jordan's point about 5 years of 11 wins out of the last 8. It's his point in the presser the other day when asked about big picture versus Ohio State is like, his point was just judge me on the whole, right? Like, I'm not asking you, like, it's totally fair to ask why aren't we beating Ohio State or why is the record, like, that's totally fair, but also like judge me on the whole of the situation. And sometimes we lose the forest for the trees a little bit, and segueing into Indiana, like, it's a great discussion it's such a great problem to have, the problems that Penn State football has when you look around at the Indianas and the Northwesterns and the or just even look across campus at the basketball team, right? Indiana football, I think, has always been like the parallel to like Penn State basketball, where it's just when you stop and kind of take a step back, you realize like how crazy some of our complaining and whining about the football team is, but at the same time, it's major college football, and everybody's out there to win national titles, or at least the top end of the sport is there to win national titles. So I guess my final point on that is his contract makes it's not even a discussion for at least like 5 years. And the overall point that you both made, which is how do you know you're going to go out there and do something better? I don't think you know that. And the only coaches that you could point to and say, this guy can win a national title, they're not coming here. Or even if they wanted to come here, the school wouldn't want them.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think the bigger issue we have is finding the right offensive coordinator. And I don't necessarily have any issues with Yurcich, but I like the way we're trending in terms of the packages we run, but there's something missing to our offense, and there has been for a long time. I mean, even you look at Moorhead's offense, like a lot of that we relied on home run 50-50 balls, and we just had the receivers that could out jump people and the tight ends that could out jump people and generational talents like Saquon Barkley. But I think we're missing something offensively. I don't know how you guys feel, but there's just a piece of our offense that we don't have. And to me, it feels the wide receiver position. Either we're not recruiting it well, we're not getting the right transfers in. And you look at Dante Cephas coming in. His counterpart from the same state or same university goes to UNC and is tearing it up. So it's like, why are we always missing at certain positions, I guess? I don't know. I'll let you guys talk, either Devin or Zach. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point right now, it's definitely the wide receiver group. It seems like over the last 8 or 10 years, whatever, there is always a group that's missing. For a while was the offensive line. Excuse me. And I don't think the offensive line has been amazing necessarily this year, but I think they've stabilized compared to how much of a question mark offensive line has been in years past. But it's just you're right. It seems like we just keep ending up like one puzzle piece short of a full puzzle on the offensive side of the football. If I can use a simple analogy, like we're close. I think we're close. I mean, obviously it didn't look like we were close against Ohio State. But I think just in terms of like personnel pieces, obviously you have to like the running backs. I mean, you have to like the quarterback, even though it didn't look that great Saturday. I think the offensive line again is probably in as good a shape as it's been under Franklin. And then obviously you love the tight ends, and this year just the wide receivers are miserable, and it's just kind of everything is bleeding from there because it's causing the quarterback problems and it's causing the play caller problems. Because what kind of offense do you scheme up when the other team doesn't respect your ability to utilize the whole field? I guess to answer your question, Jordo, it's like you can have any offensive coordinator that you want, but if you don't have the complete package in terms of all of your position groups, the really good teams or the really good defenses like in Ohio State, it's going to be tough, right? You can't have a giant question mark, especially in today's, let's be honest, in today's day and age, and in the passing, centric offenses that we see now. This was like 30 years ago. Paterno would just be like 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and we'd run. And in today's day and age, you just can't do that. One thing I'll say just briefly, and I'll turn this over to Devin. What's interesting for me, if you go back to 2020, and nobody wants to go back and think about 2020, but Kirk Ciarrocca, the offensive coordinator, the one thing Penn State was good at in 2020 was real short yardage. And that was, if you remember, the Will Levis package, where like every 3rd and 1 and every 4th and 1, they brought Levis, and we converted like crazy. And if you remember Kevon Lee, we went up to Michigan and won in Ann Arbor. Interestingly, we went up to Michigan and won in Ann Arbor, and that was the year when nobody was allowed in the stadium. So, think of that what you will, I guess, in light of recent events. But we were really good, like 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and we had no. Clifford was not great. Will Levis could not hit the broadside of a barn. We really didn't have any wide receivers that scared anybody. And then at the end of the season, after 1 year, Franklin fires Ciarrocca, goes out and gets Mike Yurcich. And the whole point was we're going to import some of that like Big 12 style air raid principles, use the whole width of the field, line your receiver. And where have we arrived at right now? Basically, we're now back to that like Ciarrocca era. Like, well, we like our ability to and if you listen to Franklin in the pressers, it's like, what's our identity? We staying ahead of the sticks, getting 3 yards, getting into manageable third downs and converting 4th and short. Okay, so it's like we're right back to where we were a couple years ago, where you fired the offensive coordinator because that's what we were, so you could go out and get the other guy who to make things completely different, and the other guy brings in the 5-star quarterback Aller, and we're just back to where we were. That to me is very that's something that I don't think anyone's really talking about, and partly because again nobody wants to think about 2020, but it's just very interesting to me. And I know I'm really rambling on here. I promised, Evan, then I'll turn it over to you. The one thing I'll say. It seems like every year when we're talking about the Penn State offense, it's different, and it's either based on that particular offensive coordinator or it's based on scheming around known and obvious problems with the offensive personnel. It's never like this is a James Franklin offense, right? Like when you look at Oklahoma State play, like there's a Mike Gundy spirit or persona that like lives through that offense every year. And
it was same with like Mike Leach, like same thing, like
and. There doesn't seem to be an underlying like James Franklin style of offense or James Franklin philosophy.
Yeah, capable. That's what it is.
And and that's okay. I mean, I like there's nothing. I'm not saying it's inherently bad to be like the sort of like the GM type coach where I want really good coordinators, and then I want them to be capable and confident to do the job, and I'm not going to micromanage them. I think that's okay, but the flip side is when you start to just churn through coordinators and things aren't working, then there's the one constant is the head coach. So just some interesting things.
And like our viewer here, David said, Franklin isn't going where as long as he continues double-digit win seasons, which is exactly what we said earlier in the podcast. Regardless if he beats Ohio State or Michigan, you win 10 plus games a year, especially with the expanded playoffs where you're making the playoffs. You're never going to get fired. Or if you do, something crazy had to happen. But I just don't, like you said, people can complain all they want. Franklin's not going anywhere. So how do we get to that next step? And I think it's looking at the offense. I mean, pending Manny Diaz stays, which I think he's about to get paid, like you guys were talking about last weekend. I think he's going to get paid to go be a head coach again because I mean, that defense did everything we could have imagined to do this following weekend against Ohio State, keeping the game close. Now, granted, Maserati Marv still living in my nightmares, but okay, we held them to what, 20 points total? Like, that's enough to win a game. That is enough to win a game. So the defense did their job, and I think Manny Diaz has been phenomenal. It's just the offense is not there. So I don't know if we need another offensive coordinator because that would be what, 6 offensive coordinators under Franklin?
John Don, Ricky Ronnie, Joe Moorhead, Shiraka, Yurcich. So
it'd be our 6th one. I mean, that's an issue. So I think that's where the improvement needs to come. And maybe when you get the right offensive coordinator, maybe you go Bama style and just like try to get one of those home run hitters who is down on his luck at the time, but is a good coach. You get him for 1 to 2 years and kind of move through that way. But
Manny Diaz, I mean, I think Manny Diaz is a great example of that.
Exactly.
You bring in a guy that has that head coaching experience. You know he's going to be hungry to try to get back to the top. And I mean, I think just find the best guy for the job. I don't really particularly – it doesn't have to be like a fired head coach who wants revenge. It doesn't have to be a young up-and-comer. It just find the best guy for the job. And, again, part of that for me goes back to what – if you're Franklin hiring an offensive coordinator, is there some overarching philosophy that when he's interviewing or when he's trying to find that – like here's who we are at Penn State on offense, and I need you to come in, bring your own touch – into it, but like this is who we are, and you're going to have to incorporate that, or you're going to have to kind of mold yourself into that. I don't know if that's the case. If it's just, hey, here's our guys, build an offense that works for that. I mean, and that's okay too. I'm not actually saying one way is better than the other. I just with Franklin and the way that we've looked on offense over the years with to varying degrees of success and various different styles, it's just not clear to me. Like, is he actually putting his thumb on the scale, or is it hire a coordinator and turn him loose and it's your offense? I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah. So we'll change gears here. Let's look ahead. We're done with Ohio State. Looking ahead, Indiana. So on paper, big mismatch. We have unranked Indiana. What's their current record? I think they're 2-5 in the Big Ten, right? Or no, 2-5 total, 0-4 in the
Yeah.
Big Ten, right?
Yep.
Correct.
So kind of a big mismatch on paper. I know you guys have the stats up in front of you. I'll turn it over to either of you. What do you want to talk about first? Offense, defense?
You can go ahead, Zach. Whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's a lot to say.
No, I mean, let's cut to the chase. Indiana's really bad.
Yeah.
They may be in contention for the worst team in the Big Ten at the moment. Their quarterback play has just been really abysmal. And if you watched, I think a lot of people may have actually watched the first game of the year. They hosted Ohio State, and they kind of actually hung around and they scored 3 points, so it's like they were never really threatening Ohio State for the win, but their defense was actually somewhat solid. They're not getting anything out of the quarterback play. They split time early on between Brendan Sorsby and Taven Jackson, who is actually I think a brother, like half brother too, if you follow Big Ten basketball. Trace Jackson Davis, the former Indiana star, and he's a good this Jackson, the quarterback, is a good athlete, good runner, but just cannot throw the ball. And Sorsby's not a whole lot better. If you remember the Penn State game out at Indiana last year, they played at least 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks. That was the weird game where like they started a guy who had already announced that he was transferring at the end of the year, and it was just really odd. So they're kind of a mess. I think their defense is, compared to their offense anyway, not horrendous. They're struggling right now stopping the run, but they are ranked 23rd in the country.
Well, they're on the field the entire time too.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely part of it. I mean, you look at their offense right now; they're 110th in the country in rushing offense. They're 100th in passing offense. They're 111th in pass efficiency. They're 116th in yards per game on offense. They're 122 in scoring offense. Offensive, I mean, I don't know how much more there is to say about Indiana's offense than reading those stats off. They're averaging 17.9 points per game. Jalen Lucas is kind of like their scat back and a little bit of a receiver, and I think is their punt returner. He's a guy that could possibly give Penn State some trouble, but it really, it seems like the type of game where Penn State really should be feasting. I mean, Indiana's offense they're giving up a ton of tackles for losses. They're giving up a lot of sacks. They're just really, really poor offensively. So I think as long as Penn State's defense isn't caught kind of sleeping or still in the doldrums after the Ohio State game, they really should have their way with the Indiana defense. So for me, with the Indiana offense. So for me, the bigger story is we've been talking about it, the offense, Penn State offense. Like what are we going to do? We're going to come out and we're just going to try to be methodical and dink and dunk again, or does Franklin call Corey Geiger up and say, "Hey, tell me some of these ideas about just chucking it deep. Like, what should we do here?" I don't expect to see that, but I do wonder if the Ohio State game was sort of a referendum on the whole offensive coaching staff's strategy, where they go back to the drawing board and say, "Hey, you know what? All these reporters and all the fans bitching right now, like they're making a good point. Like I don't care if it's not in our comfort zone. I don't care if it's not in Drew's.
I mean, we kind of saw that against UMass.
We got to throw the ball down the field, and there's pretty much no way we can lose this game. So let's not wait for the Maryland game next week on the road, which they're going to be a bit more of a lively opponent. Let's figure it out this week. I don't care if there's going to be some growing pains. I don't care if Drew throws his first interception. Frankly, it might be good to get that out of the way. Seriously. But you almost have to force yourself this week to say, let's get out of our comfort zone, because obviously our comfort zone is not good enough.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's really much left to say about Indiana. Total mismatch on paper. We should have no issues with them. This game is at noon on CBS, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's at home, so should take care of business. I don't really have anything else to say. I mean, Indiana just kind of sucks, and it's another one of those mail it in kind of games that the Big Ten has been this year, really. And
Indiana just fired their offensive coordinator like a couple weeks ago, so it's even like they're, as far as like scouting them, it's who knows, right? Because they're all of a sudden you fire.
I mean, realistically, we have 2 real games left on the schedule.
Yeah,
it's at Maryland and Michigan at home.
Yeah.
So really shouldn't be any competition between any of those games. And then obviously the bowl game. But I will say this as an ending kind of statement. Penn State is not eliminated from the playoffs yet. It's highly unlikely. But if Penn State can, by some miracle, beat Michigan, we'll be in the conversation. I'm not saying we'll make the playoff, depending on how tiebreakers work, all that stuff. Lots of things have to happen, but yeah, we'll at least still be in the conversation. So take with that what you will. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up here?
I have a couple of names on defense. I agree that Indiana is absolutely, they're just bad. They're really bad. Offensively, they are really bad. But I think they got some dudes on defense that I would be a little concerned about. Aaron Casey is a linebacker. He has 8 TFLs this year, 3 sacks, averaging about 8.
I think he was kind of an issue last year too.
I feel like
I remember hearing that name.
So he's somebody that I'm concerned about. And then they have a defensive back, Philip Dunham, who's a true sophomore. He's number 6. He's a kid that, as much as I agree with Zach that we need to get out of our comfort zone. I mean, I still think we should just run the ball down their throats. But if we're gonna just throw it 40 times, like we got to take some shots. I probably want to take shots at number 6. He can play. I think he's a really solid DB, and if we throw it at him, he's going to make a play, and he might get that first pick on Drew Aller. Just some things that I'll be looking at on Saturday. I think the first quarter is going to be awful. I think it will be 0-0 at the end of the first quarter because we have shown that we can't play at noon, even though obviously this one's at home and that's helpful. We've shown that we struggle with noon games, and Indiana's defense at least has a pulse. Their offense is awful.
Hot take: we just struggle always in the first.
Yeah, and I mean, I still think this is a ball game, and I guess I'll kick us off our scores because I know we want to try to be under 30. I'm gonna be a little pessimistic. I'm actually gonna go Penn State 17, Indiana 6. I think it's a fight because I think our offense. I think Drew Aller is struggling right now. If you saw him crying in the press conference. I mean, I don't want to call him out because he's a 19-year-old kid and he knows he played bad and he is supposed to be this guy for Penn State. And I think he has such a bright future. But now I'm concerned is can he bounce back? Because he's never had a game like that in his career. Zach and I talked about it on the post-wrap podcast. Like that's the first game in his career that was like that. So can he bounce back? And I think our wide receivers are awful. And I don't think that we can run the ball enough to where I'm concerned. I'm going 17-6.
That's quite the prediction. I kind of
I'm
like it.
Though. Hey, I almost called 70 against Delaware, so I feel like I have some leeway to be pessimistic. I said 19-14 against Ohio State, with Ohio State winning. So I think I'm on a little bit of a hot streak, and I have no faith in our offense right now unless our defense can get a pick 6 or a fumble 6, or
that doesn't get called back.
Or Daquan Hardy gets 2 punt returns somehow. Like I just don't think we can score enough. So 17-6.
So keeping with that same mindset, I actually really like that because the immediate number when I saw Indiana, I was like, I think it's gonna be a little closer than people may think. I'm thinking 22-9. So that was I don't think they're going to score touchdowns, but I think we're going to see some.
I agree. I don't think they can score touchdowns.
Some field goals there. What you got, Zach?
So I think you guys are overthinking it a little bit. Rutgers put up 31 on them in Bloomington.
I think Rutgers' offense is better than ours.
I think it's got the same problems that we do, but even more magnified. Passing issues. They got a really good run.
Gavin Winston is still an athlete.
Rutgers has a good running quarterback, and they have a really good running back, and they know who they are and they know their philosophy. Again, I shouldn't jump ahead, but I'm gonna say 31-10. I do agree it will be slow early. I think there may be some growing pains because I do think they're going to try to challenge through the air just because if they
I'd
don't,
be putting 8 guys in the box every time.
I mean, if we don't try stuff through the air, then I will, we'll talk about it in the post game, but it's like, what are we doing? I mean, did nobody watch the Ohio State game? Did nobody do an autopsy on the Ohio State game and say, what do we got to get better at?
I mean, the Ohio State fans say we won't do our homework on it. So,
well, yeah. we're just millennials that wanted easy.
Yeah, we just wanted easy. So it's all
but
good.
I think ultimately they'll get kind of back to, at the end of the day, to Devin's point, I think Indiana can really be run on. So what I say, 31-10. I just think maybe Indiana gets a late touchdown. I just think offensively they are so handicapped that their defense is. I agree with Devin. I think they're not horrible. And if you look at their scores, I mean, first game of the season, Ohio State 23-3. Then they killed FCS, Indiana State. Then Louisville, who's ended up having a pretty nice season, they only lost to Louisville 21-14. And then it just started, the wheels kind of just to fall off. And terrible Akron with Joe Moorhead, speak of the devil, had 27. Maryland put up 44 on them. Michigan obviously put up 52. Rutgers 31. So I think they kind of their spirit has been broken perhaps a little bit. So we'll see. 31-10.
All right.
I hope you're right. I do.
I do too. I think that's all we got for today. You guys have anything else before we head out?
Negative.
All right. No Huddle Nation out.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.